Building dynamic file paths is a really important technique if you're a consultant and sharing your solutions with others, or maybe you're sharing across the organization where people have different data paths mapped. The challenge is that even though it's relatively easy to set up using the fn get parameter function that's built into Monkey Tools, the challenge that we run into is it depends on whether or not the original construction is compatible with the way that the user is using things on the remote end. In other words, if you've built a solution to target a local folder, as long as somebody puts it in a local folder, everything's fine. But if they put it into a folder that syncs to SharePoint, well, suddenly when you open it up, you're going to get a SharePoint file path and the connectors are going to blow up because they're not the same. So this is where the fn SmartFile function comes in, is to help you navigate this kind of pain. So I'm just going to go and show you really quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to inject the function into the workbook. So if we go to Monkey Tools, this is one of the free features that's available for people. You'll notice that there is a SmartFile function and a SmartFile monkey. This is a pro feature. This one is free. And in this video, I'm going to show how to hook up the free function manually. So I'm just going to go and inject this into the workbook. You're going to want your fn get parameter function first and your fn SmartFile as well. Now I do want to just call out really quick, this is synced or is stored in a local folder that is not syncing to SharePoint. And the original connection that we have, what I've set up is I've gone back to my source step. You'll notice that we're using fn get parameter to pull out the file path, which is pointed to that local Jan 2008 CSV file on my computer. That is wrapped in the file contents to extract the contents from it and then import it as a CSV document. So basically I just built this by importing the CSV and then overriding the file path with this. Now, what I want to do is I want to rebuild this whole thing from scratch and show you an alternate version that uses the fn SmartFile path. So here's how this is going to work, is I'm going to go right click, new query, other sources, and I'm going to start from a completely blank query. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get the fn get parameter for the file path so that I can see what I'm looking at. And there it is. There is my demos file path. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to click the FX button and I'm going to wrap my source, which is this file path here, in fn SmartFile. And we'll put in the source. We'll hit enter on that, and you'll notice that it gives me a picture of the Jan 2008 CSV. Now, before I go too much further, I am going to change this custom step here. I'm going to rename this one, and I'm just going to go and call this one SmartFile. There we go. And I think I'm just going to rename my query as well and call it SmartFile as well. All right. I'm now going to import this. So I'm just going to double click on it. Power Query will go and do its import. Now it has given me an issue here, and this is because this column needed to be imported using a change type with locale. So I'm just going to go back to the promoted header step here, and we're going to change the type of this column here. Sorry, that's not the way we're going to do it. We're going to go with this one. There we are. And using locale. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert a step here to set this to an American English Standard here. So we'll just wait for this to pop up. There we are. Let's change that to a date, and we'll grab our English United States. Let's say OK. That's going to convert that properly. Change type now works. No red lines. Everything looks good. So I now have basically the exact same contents as what we have over here, but I used my fn SmartFile to go get it instead of using a hard-coded file.contents connector. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit close and load 2. I'm going to bring this back to Excel, and I'm going to load this one or land this one here side by side. So we're just going to go table, existing worksheet, and we're going to say OK, and we're going to land the data. So you go, okay, well, why would I go through all the extra effort on this? Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the workbook into a SharePoint syncing folder, and I'm going to reopen it, and we're going to see what happens when we try and do a refresh. So bear with me as I get that done. All right, so that part's done. And just to prove this out, I'm going to hop over to my query options page here. And you can now see that the file path is using something completely different. It's actually using a SharePoint site where it's stored in a shared folder. The other thing I want to point out with this is a little bit concerning is that my slashes here are working differently because websites use a / where the local hard drive uses a \. So the concern that we have now is what's going to happen if I try and refresh my queries against this dynamic path. Will they actually work? So let's go back to the data worksheet here. I'm just going to open up the queries and connections pane. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and refresh file contents. So this is the original one here that was used, and you'll notice that it comes back and says, I'm sorry, but you cannot do that. It has to be an absolute path. Forget it. We're not going anywhere. So download did not complete. So that's the original solution, just using fn get parameter, swapping it in place of the file name. That's not going to work if your file gets stored into a SharePoint syncing folder when it wasn't before. Now, if you use the SharePoint connector, then it will be fine until you stored it in maybe a local folder and you aren't syncing. That's going to be a bit more of an issue as well. What about SmartFile? Well, SmartFile is built to be wholly compatible so you can move things back and forward, no problem. So here we go. We're going to go right click. We're going to choose refresh. Now it is going to say, hey, I've noticed this is in a SharePoint syncing folder now. You do need to go and actually declare your privacy levels for me. So I'm just going to set this to organizational like my SharePoint site. If I need to log in and provide a password, it will pop up for that as well. But what you can see right now is that this is actually going through and it has now loaded the 2030 rows. So even though this is now in a SharePoint syncing folder, this still works. I built it on the local version, but it still works against the web version. The importance of this is I can now zip up the solution, send it to any client, and I don't have to care where they store it, whether they put it in a local or a SharePoint syncing folder, it will still work. So that's the magic of using the SmartFile function. Thanks for watching this episode of Using Monkey Tools. To get your own monkey, visit our website at monkeytools.ca. Or if you subscribe to Skillwave's Self-Service Business Intelligence Academy, you'll get a free annual pro license included with your subscription. And remember, Monkey Tools was developed to support better Excel and Power BI solutions. If you want to learn how to really master these tools, you should definitely check out our full course catalog at skillwave.training.